So it is Thursday, December 26, 2024, and here are seven big stories for today. So we're going to start here. There was apparently another incident. So electricity between Finland and Estonia through the East Estlink 2 connection is currently halted. There have been reports that Xin Xin Tiang vessel of Hong Kong has crossed the Estlink 2 today at noon. As it moved into the area of the cable, its speed decreased. Now, I don't know if it's that or something else. On Christmas, undersea power cable was cut. The ship Xin Xin Tiang crossed the cable at noon, making third time the Chinese ship was suspected of a cable cut. The Eagle S from St. Petersburg is also a suspect with the same destination in Egypt as the Chinese ship, is currently being stopped by the Coast Guard of Finland. So they're looking at this. The Finnish authorities are giving a press conference regarding the S-Link 2. Police have reason to suspect that the cable was broken off due to an external force. However, they have not yet been able to investigate the seabed. 4 more data cables were also damaged. Police say it's part of the same operation. According to the National Bureau of Investigation, the NBI, the case is now being investigated as aggravated criminal damage. Eagle S ship is the main suspect. It was taken into custody by border guard. Its anchor was down in the vicinity of the cable, which was unusual. Customs have also launched a preliminary investigation into the case of aggravated sanctions violation. They suspect Eagle S of belonging to the Russian Shadow Fleet. It was transporting unleaded petrol loaded in Russian ports. So that's what we know right now. So they're getting a twofer, it looks like, by transporting the Shadow Fleet, gas, oil, whatever, and simultaneously cutting cables to harass the Europeans at the same time. This is Kyiv Post now. Finnish investigative authorities to hold a press conference at 2 p.m. local time. The current information is the Eagle S tanker slowed at the exact location of the breakage. So that's what it looks like, but they've done it before and they may continue to do it again because there was no penalty for what happened the first and second time. So why not do it a third time? And Jay in Kyiv said this right. It seems that the Russia-China war machine can continue dismantling Western civilization with zero consequence. So as long as nothing actually happens, you'll see another one. I mean, when the first one happened, I was predicting, hey, this is going to happen again unless something happens about it, but nothing happened. Okay, indeed, prohibit Russian shipping in the Baltic Sea. Now, of course, that would be a huge international incident. Russia would cry foul and maybe nuclear saber rattle or whatever. For 4 centuries before 1857, Denmark kept order in the Baltic Sea with EU and NATO support, and it should be able to restore it. But there's just not any willingness to keep that sort of order, and every aggression, it's like a petulant child, like pushing the boundaries for the parents or teachers just to see how far they can get away with things, and they're getting away with things. All right, meanwhile, let's shift gears to the second big story. Russia claimed a tea attack sank its cargo ship in the Mediterranean. I don't think that's what happened. Now, Russian Defense Ministry is affiliated with U.S. sanctioned company claims that the tea attack caused 3 explosions that sank the Ursa Major. I said Ursula Major the other day. I apologize for that. I read it too quickly. Ursa Major vessel earlier this week. Now, here is the Russian cargo ship Ursa Major sinks in the Mediterranean in what's happening with shipping. And so we're going to watch little clips of this, a minute here and then a couple minutes later on at about the 10-minute mark.
See the 2 cranes on board. You'll notice that the bulbous bow is out of the water. The ship is listing to the starboard side and down aft. Some people have talked about the ship was overloaded and the cargo shifted. That is not the case. If this ship was overloaded prior to this event, we would have seen a shift of cargo when it sailed through the North Sea, through the English Channel and out into the Atlantic. More than likely, the explosion in the engine room, whatever caused it, and we'll talk about that in a minute, severed one of the water intakes, the sea suction. The ships have openings to the ocean. You have to take water into the ship for cooling, for fire pumps, for desalinization. So more than likely, if they had an engine room explosion, what has happened is we've gotten water into the vessel, and now the ship is listing down to the starboard side quarter.
Okay, so it looks like some kind of explosion rather than that they just tipped over. Okay, let's move our attention to about just before the 10-minute mark.
What's interesting about this vessel, and one of the reasons that I am thinking it is more likely mechanical than anything else, has to do with the track record of the vessel. You may remember I talked about how the Russians are using ships in ways that they're not designed to be used for. This has a lot to do with the Russia-Ukraine war. This vessel, when you start going through the data, there's some interesting aspects. So this is Equus. This is an online database that tracks vessels. This is the recording for it. Now, when ships sail to other countries, no matter what their registry is or what their classification society is, and let me clarify, all ships have to be registered in a country. That is the flag you fly off of it. In the case of Ursa Major, it is Russian. However, you have to have a classification society. That is a third-party inspection agency. They're tasked with ensuring that the ship complies with all the international regulations. It's like if you have a car inspection and you have to get your car inspected. This is what that is. In the United States, the agency it does is U.S. Coast Guard. Coast Guard goes on board. They board about 1 out of every 8 to 10 ships that come in to port and do an inspection. The last time this ship was inspected was in Germany in 2022, and they identified 13 deficiencies. And when you look at the
Okay. And so this is leading us to the conclusion that it's probably that they just haven't kept it up rather than that there was some kind of attack on the ship. But let's continue listening.
Deficiencies they identified, a lot of certification and documentation were out of order. The emergency systems, the abandoned ship drills, fire safety doors within the ship were not meeting qualifications, ISM, life safety appliances, and more importantly, accommodations, wages, health protection for the crew, and a variety of other issues. A lot of this comes into being because this ship has been operating solely between Russia and Syria. And you know, the Russians and the Syrians are not doing the inspection that needs. Since the Russia-Ukraine war, the Russians have started establishing a kind of a parallel fleet, a fleet that operates within their own waters and their own friendly countries, which means they're not going into countries that will go on board, inspect these vessels, and ensure that they're meeting the minimum safety requirements. And it's quite...
And so they're cutting corners, and the cutting corners is leading to problems. Elsewhere, he talked about what was going on with the earlier ships that fell apart in the Sea of Azov. They shouldn't have been out there. It wasn't necessarily that they weren't kept up, but they shouldn't have been, they weren't seaworthy for that kind of rating. They were more like river ships.
Possible that Ursa Major had an engineering deficiency that was not caught because the ship is not being inspected by a classification society and it's not being inspected by port state control as it comes in and out of countries. So this goes to highlight really the poor material condition that we find the Russian merchant marine in. They are operating ships without the necessary maintenance and oversight, and that is leading to loss. Now, could this be something else? Could there be nefarious issues going on? Could it be the Ukrainians planting charges? And yeah, I guess so. But to me, when you start looking at how the Russians operate this ship, this appears to be more in line with poor material condition, operating ships well beyond their service life, putting them into environments they should not be in, and in the case of Ursa Major here, running a ship pretty hard over the past couple of years without maybe the necessary maintenance and downtime to ensure that you don't have a major explosion. That explosion could be a crankcase, a main engine explosion.
And so we're going to stop there. So it's probably more likely that it's just poor maintenance and not, as Sputnik is saying, a T attack that was carried out against the Russian vessel Ursa Major, which sank in the Mediterranean. 3 explosions occurred on the starboard side of Ursa Major, which sank her. Okay. So, by the way, Ursa Major, interestingly known, I mean, as a metaphor alert, is known as the Great Bear. It's actually the name of a constellation in the northern sky, and the Latin name means great or large bear. So, now, this plane that, I was about to say ship, but it wasn't a ship. The plane that went down, it was hit somewhere near Chechnya and then had to fly all the way to Kazakhstan. We were talking about that this morning, and there was a passenger plane, and the aircraft apparently was hit by Russian anti-aircraft artillery, thinking that it was some kind of attack, and then they wouldn't let them land. You know, when you think about that, this was a civilian passenger airplane. And think about that. Now, think about what Ronald Reagan had said about the time that the Korean Airlines flight 007 was shot down by the Soviet Union.
This was the Soviet Union against the world and the moral precepts which guide human relations among people everywhere. It was an act of barbarism, born of a society which wantonly disregards individual rights and the value of human life and seeks constantly to expand and dominate other nations.
Where's that kind of moral clarity today? Okay, Turkey will help the new Syrian leadership create 300,000 strong army, providing advisory and expert support. Damascus's goal is to create an army structure of 300,000 people in the next year and a half. Both the sensitive situation inside the country and the threat of Israel make this necessary. Now, so Turkey is really kind of the new bigwig in the neighborhood, and they've really expanded their role, which is why when you see something like this, so Erdogan is saying that he's supporting Crimea's return to Ukraine. That's important because his stature has risen significantly. That's a really big thing. Now, again, he's not in Ukraine's corner. Erdogan's in Turkey's corner, and this just happens to be an interest of Turkey to kind of push the Russians back a bit and let them have this historic homeland of the Tartars back in Ukraine. Okay, meanwhile, Biden was condemning Russia's massive Christmas attack on Ukraine energy infrastructure and directed the Pentagon to accelerate the delivery of weapons to Ukraine. Now, I don't know. Great. But here's the actual White House statement. It's not very long. In the early hours of Christmas, Russia launched waves of missiles and drone attacks in Ukrainian cities and critical energy infrastructure. The purpose of this outrageous attack was to cut off Ukrainian people's access to heat and electricity during the winter. The Ukrainian people deserve to live in peace and safety, and the United States and the international community must continue to stand with Ukraine until it triumphs over Russian aggression. I've directed the Department of Defense to continue its surge of weapons deliveries to Ukraine. So nothing actually happened here. Like, it's not as a consequence of what you did, we're going to do more. We're just going to do more of the same thing that we were already doing, but making a statement about it. I just don't. It was an unnecessary statement. I guess if you think statements matter, but really delivery matters far more than the statements. Meanwhile, you've heard about DOGE, D-O-G-E. This is Department of Government something or another to cut the budget. I can't remember the name. It's escaping me right now. Elon Musk is behind this kind of thing. And Applebaum is posting this. Thanks to the Republican Congress, a tsunami of lies from Musk and others, the only U.S. agency dedicated to tracking and exposing Russian and Chinese propaganda around the world ceases to exist. Okay, so they're not funding this arm of the government because they're trying to eliminate all these what they consider unnecessary things. I don't think that they're really getting that this is necessary. I don't think that they were trying to eliminate this. They were just trying to eliminate everything that they could eliminate. And through trial and error, they're going to figure out what works and what can be eliminated. Like one thing was RFK Stadium. Should it go from the city to the federal government or vice versa? And things along those lines that are peripheral. And then we're going to have to figure out how to do things that really matter. We'll get that right eventually. Okay, meanwhile, Iran and Russia prepare to sign a new strategic agreement to strengthen the alliance. I talked about this yesterday in this video about how Putin may have just made his greatest geopolitical mistake. Now, it depends on which way this goes. Iran and Russia intend to cement their relations by signing a new strategic partnership, the media reported. The agreement is planned to be concluded before the inauguration of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump, that is on January 19th, they plan to have this done. Trump's inauguration takes place on the 20th. The new agreement will replace a 20-year strategic pact signed in 2001 and extended to 2020. It covers areas such as energy, manufacturing, transportation, and agriculture. But if this new agreement is also military support, like it is for North Korea and Russia, if they do that, which Iran's really nervous right now because they've just been severely weakened. Russia's really nervous right now because they've just been severely weakened. If they ally and do what they did between North Korea and Russia, that's going to be very problematic for the world. But while they're thinking that they're stronger, this actually is going to be the worst possible thing that Putin can do, because Trump is going to look on this and think, okay, well, you're allying with my great enemy or adversary in Iran. That's not going to go over well. Okay, we'll see how that plays out. Latvia handed over 612 cars confiscated from drunk drivers to Ukraine. Latvia has handed over Ukraine cars confiscated the total euro of 2.25 million. That'll go a long way in helping the effort. And Japan just transferred 3 billion from frozen Russian assets. So thank you to Japan. And with that, the Netherlands also allocated an additional 6 billion euros to Ukraine. And so support keeps flowing into Ukraine. So that's a very positive thing to see. Now, sometimes I get challenged about, well, this can't be this many Russian soldiers or that sort of thing. I mean, you're just reading the Ukrainian press. Okay, I mean, that's a fair charge, but from everything I can detect, they're not very far off of what is actual. And here is the mayor of Moscow, Sobyan, announcing that there are 600,000 seriously wounded and disabled who need rehabilitation. Okay, 600,000 who need rehabilitation. So you add 600,000 and then likely killed number, and you're probably at that 750 to 800,000 kind of number. That's where the Ukrainians are. And who's this guy? He's the mayor of Moscow. So 600,000 wounded around Moscow. Well, that's something. Okay, so for whatever that's worth, I hope that answers that question. Okay, this is Keith Kellogg. Keith Kellogg is Trump's envoy to deal with the peace negotiations. And he said this: Christmas should be a time of peace. Yet Ukraine was brutally attacked on Christmas Day. Launching large-scale missile and drone attacks on the day of the Lord's birth is wrong. The world is closely watching actions on both sides. The U.S. is more resolved than ever to bring peace to the region. Okay, so he's watching, he's taking notes, trying to understand what's going on. So I don't think that you're going to see that this is any kind of reality. People would talk about how Putin and Trump are just so chummy that Trump's going to just do whatever Putin wants him to do and they just get along. I don't think that's it at all. I really don't. I think there's going to be a different reality come January 20th. All right, my friends, last little bit, Darth Putin talking about his Christmas Day. Morning, mass missile attack on civilian power stations. Lunch, damage undersea cables. Afternoon, shoot down civilian airliner. Evening, unwrap presents. Yeah, that's the kind of day that it was on Christmas. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.